If you're watching this right now and you haven't hit the like button, Billy, get on it. Bug your brother. Tell him to do the same.
Show, at what point is Santiago Espinal's $160 he hitting a problem?
Boy, I think it's a problem now, right? I think we might already be at that point. It's
Yeah.
unfortunate, right? Because Espinal, like, remember at the beginning of last year, and he was like he was just hitting the snot out of the ball and talking about how like the barrel rate was up and the exit velo was up and all the important numbers were up, and he was making great defensive plays as well this year. And yes, there were some injuries that you add into the equation as well, but I think we are seeing the true Espinal, or at the very least closer to it, in the sense of he is a utility man and not an everyday second baseman. Luckily for the Blue Jays, they do have an everyday second baseman, and his name is Whit Merrifield. But you're right. I think Espinal's role is likely that of the backup shortstop, backup second baseman, and not an everyday player. Unfortunately, despite the fact that I really do think, and I think every fan base does this, they like pick a guy who is like has some like grit and sandpaper to them to a certain degree, and everyone picks someone who they really like. Like it's almost like by definition you can't pick the stars, so you can't pick a Bo Bichette or a Vladdy or an Alek Manoah, for example. And Santiago Espinal has fit that bill, I think, for the Blue Jays the last couple of seasons. Unfortunately, probably not this year. I'm not sure who that guy is this year, but I don't think it's Espinal.
I don't think it's Kevin Biggio.
No, it's not.
I'm going to jump. I want to jump in here actually while we're talking Espinal, and you mentioned Whit Merrifield. We have a question from the Patreon that I want to get to. So Bradley says he was listening to Blair and Barker the other day and was shocked to hear that Barker had suggested the Blue Jays should consider picking up the Whit Merrifield option for next year. So $6.7 million is what he's getting this year. The mutual option is for $18 million. That sure seems steep, and I don't think anybody last year. I think we just assumed that was a non-starter. What are your thoughts on the Blue Jays picking up Whit Merrifield's $18 million option for next year? And what would he need to do this season to make that happen as a 35-year-old?
As a 35-year-old, I do think, because there are no real, real consistent perhaps options that you can bring up and just be like, just to slot right in as the everyday second baseman. I think as it stands right now at the beginning of May, I think I probably, if Whit Merrifield continues playing the way he has been, I think I would probably have them pick up that option, if only because we were talking about some of the guys down in the minor league system. I mean, I suppose the only two
we
guys
could use another year, right, of development there.
That's what it is, I think. Like if you're, I'm not saying you have to necessarily go out and sign Merrifield to like an $18 to $20 million a year deal for the next couple of years, because he will be an older guy by the time such a deal is done. But if it's just 1 year, I think I would do it. And then at the end of the following year, you hope that, and maybe he has or has not been traded by this point, but you hope that Aurelvis Martinez can be your everyday second baseman, or that Addison Barger is a guy who can be an infielder in some way. Because the other half of it too is, who the heck knows what happens with Matt Chapman in the offseason? Like I would like to think that Matt Chapman is going to sign a long-term deal with the Blue Jays, and it might be a teensy bit more money than you're comfortable with, because he's been playing so well, but he's also a Scott Boras client. And as we all know, the Scott Boras clients tend to not re-sign until they have tested all the available options. So I have a feeling Matt Chapman, like one way or another, is testing free agency. Even if he does eventually come back, I have a feeling he is testing free agency. But because there's like, the infield is so certain right now, and then all of a sudden you're going to go into an off season where if you don't pick up this option, it's very uncertain, right? Then all of a sudden you have holes at second. Oh my goodness. I don't want to see the days of like balls from the left side of the diamond going to first, and you're thinking, oh, who's throwing this? Like it's such an adventure so many of the time. So I think I would rather have the certainty, pick up the option from Merrifield, and only have to deal with Matt Chapman's free agency saga versus having to deal with both second and third next year.
Fair enough.
So last week, this was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. And it actually did wound up getting talked about on Blair and Barker. So we were at least with the experts on something, which is nice for a change, right? But Spencer Horowitz has been incredible in AAA so far. He's got an on-base percentage of just under 500 at this point, with well over 100 plate appearances. He's a lefty, and yes, the lefties in this lineup have improved substantially in the last 10 days, especially Varsho and Belt, which is really nice to see. Nathan Lucas is just sitting on this bench show. He's not being given an opportunity to play. He's not contributing in any substantial way. Do you think there's a point where this team might try and catch lightning in a bottle with Spencer Horowitz and maybe do the old flipperoo, Lucas having options and maybe seeing what Horowitz can deliver?
I it's not a terrible idea, right? The only problem with it is that I think this ball club does, like, they are married a little bit to the guys they like believe in, essentially. That's not to say they don't believe in Spencer Horowitz, obviously, right? But like Nathan Lucas was the guy who got to, and of course he's been sent down a couple times and come back up, but he was the guy who broke camp with the Blue Jays. And so they clearly believed in him. Like, they believed in Lucas more than they believed in, let's say, Otto Lopez, which I was genuinely surprised by. Like, I honestly thought Otto Lopez was going to be the guy who broke camp over any of the pitcher prospects, for example, and even over Lucas and Horowitz and
just his WBC performance, right?
I honestly thought the Otto Lopez WBC before the WBC actually started, I thought the WBC would hurt him because he was away from the team. And then I don't know if I'd go so far as to say he raked, because I don't know if anyone necessarily on Team Canada raked in their couple of games. But at the same time, he was probably one of their more consistent position players. Not
a healthy contributor, if you will.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, like more than like Freddie. Like, I mean, Freddie Freeman and Tyler O'Neill and some of these other guys who are obviously like stars in Major League Baseball or close to it with Tyler O'Neill. Obviously, they're the guys you're looking at, but Otto Lopez did enough that I thought he would make the roster, and when he didn't, I was surprised. So Spencer Horowitz is definitely a terrific option. It just, I think they seem to really like what Lucas brings from the pinch running and defensive replacement aspects. And I do kind of wonder if they, at the very least right now, with them still kind of, it almost feels like you're holding your breath sometimes with the health of both George Springer and Kevin Kiermaier. And if that's the case, then you probably want Lucas available, no pun intended, in a pinch to get in there, because and maybe Spencer Horowitz can do those things as well. Maybe Otto Lopez can do those things as well. But they seem to give the 26th guy a lot of rope. I mean, remember last year, Bradley Zimmer was that guy. And I remember like there were people who would call him to JSOC being like, why don't they give Nathan Lucas a shot? And it's true, they probably should have, but they didn't. And Bradley Zimmer stuck on the roster like basically the entire season, actually, is what I ended up doing.
Yeah. I think there is something to be said. You make a really good point about that, just with the possibility of injuries in the outfield. To have a dude, and this is something that's probably not, Lucas probably isn't given enough credit for the fact that he can play all three outfield positions. Not everyone can do that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's probably more than anything something that the Blue Jays coaching staff, John Schneider and everyone else, just loves about him. Because the other thing is we know this club, and I'm sure most ball clubs are like this, but the Blue Jays in particular, because the three of us watch them so closely, they love the heck out of their positional versatility. Like, my God, they love guys who can do like 99% of the roles on the team, right? Kevin Biggio does virtually everything. He can play.
He has a job because of it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's probably the only reason why he is still on the roster, or at the very least hasn't been traded. Whit Merrifield, we talked about him. He's a guy who can play multiple positions and has many times like I've said many times, he deserves to be the everyday second baseman. He's not the everyday second baseman, but he is an everyday player because they just use him in a variety of roles when they want to give like Kiermaier a day off or Springer a day off or Varsho a day off. He's like 99% of the time the guy who's they're going to put him to the outfield. But I mean, Espinal can play multiple positions. Like, apart from the stars, virtually, and even the guys in the outfield can play multiple positions as well. So I think that is likely one of the biggest things in Lucas's favor right now.